Welcome, dear friends, to the fourth video on the Uniform Civil Code. In this video, we concentrate on the broad categories that would be covered under the Uniform Civil Code legislation. I'll also try and highlight what ought to be the characteristic or authentic response of the Christian community to its implications. As a matter of introduction, let me state a general principle. When such legislations are contemplated, or for that matter, any attempt to reform a religious community, either directly or indirectly, is contemplated, the first sector or the first source of anxiety would be the priestly class. They would be the very first to become insecure and feel that insecurity most acutely. There is a reason for this. Every reform will impact the priestly control of the people adversely. It cannot but be so. The logic for this can be understood very clearly and simply. Priestly control is inimical to the welfare of a people and, in fact, of the society at large. That is because priestly control is mainly aimed at perpetuating the status quo, and therefore it works necessarily against the interest of progress, of newer possibilities, newer thinking, newer ways of organizing one's life and the life of the society. So, I can predict that very soon the priestly class in all religious communities that are going to be affected one way or another, positively or negatively, they will begin to activate insecurity among the people, among their followers. And in doing so, they will be feeding their people with apprehensions that may have no bearing on ground realities. Since this is going to play out, I don't have to state this particular phenomenon in all its detail. At any rate, we have seen instances of this in the past, and therefore most of my viewers are familiar with this. I want to emphasize that it is not in the interest of the religious community at large to be hijacked by the priestly interest and led into a path of confrontation with the state, because in the long run, and mark my words, in the long run, the gain will be nothing as compared to the loss. It's a foolish agenda, it's a senseless agenda, and hopefully that will become clearer as we proceed with this. In today's video, let's take note of the 5 broad areas that would be covered under the Uniform Civil Code: marriage, divorce, inheritance, then maintenance, then one more, I'll recall in a moment. I'm speaking without any notes in front of me, and therefore sometimes these things happen. Now, adoption. Adoption is the 5th category, adoption. As most of you know, the Christians and Muslims are not legally allowed or empowered to adopt, and if Uniform Civil Code is enunciated with a modicum of honesty, that handicap will be removed and will have to be removed. All right. So these are the 5 broad items or categories, and of course in a small video like this, time will not permit me to examine each one of them in detail. I'll just take one of these, namely marriage, and make my point. First thing to remember is that there is a distinction between wedding and marriage. Now, wedding is a ceremony which inaugurates married life. Wedding may be conducted one way or another. It may be conducted according to the prevailing customs and practices. I don't think wedding ceremonies will ever be covered by any law, because there is simply no need to do that. Even if, in the most unlikely event of some law being enunciated to regulate wedding ceremonies, for example, there can be laws or prescriptions about avoiding excessive waste or as a matter of as an austerity measure, but it is not contemplated, therefore let's not look into that. What I want to do is to emphasize the fact that the heart of the matter is not the wedding, it is married life. Strangely and curiously, everybody is obsessed with how weddings are conducted. And great attention, much investment of money, much botheration in connection with organizing weddings, but nobody is bothered about the quality of married life. And it's assumed that if you have weddings of a certain kind, you will necessarily have quality married life. It is one of the most absurd assumptions you can make. I want to emphasize this, that the fact that you have had a Christian wedding or a church wedding is no guarantee that you will be leading or you will be able to lead a Christian married life. And our concern should be about leading Christian married life rather than with organizing Christian weddings, though I have nothing against organizing Christian weddings as such. But my point is our priority must be righted. As of now, that's not the case, and therefore I'm using this opportunity to make a case for taking married life far more seriously. And in this context, you will notice that priests who are very happy to preside over wedding ceremonies and insist on their place of preeminence and their authority over wedding ceremonies, that's when priests show off. In the context of weddings, much more than the bride, the priests show off. And if there is a bishop involved, then you know what happens. But the very same people have absolutely nothing to do with how you live your married life. They have no responsibility. And they're nowhere in the picture. I've always found this extremely intriguing. Now, why is marriage likely to become an issue in connection with Uniform Civil Code? There's only one reason for this, and that is polygamy. You know, Muslims are allowed to have 4 wives, up to 4 wives. And strangely, funnily, Hindu men feel inferior, or they feel that Muslim men are allowed legally to be privileged in having so many wives. But this is a very stupid notion. It has absolutely no bearing on facts. As of today, I don't know how many men in their senses would have more than 1 wife. Circumstances of life being what they are, one has to be completely out of his senses to think that polygamy is a great blessing or an advantage or it's a privilege. It's a burden. It's an aberration. Not only that, it is sheer propaganda that Muslim women are more polygamous than other men. If you examine the hard data on the subject, you will find, and this might shock you, that Muslim men are less polygamous than Hindu men. And this is according to the data produced by the government itself. But the propaganda would have you believe that every Muslim man has 4 wives and the Muslim men are producing dozens and dozens of children, and therefore in the near future, there will be a terrible demographic imbalance and the Muslims will once again dominate India. So Hinduism is in danger. This kind of propaganda. But reality is very, very different. In fact, if you would sample the opinion of, say, 10 Christians on this idea of polygamy, I can assure you that 8 out of 10 Christians will say that Muslim men are deliberately and maliciously polygamous, and they should not be allowed to do that. Whereas the ground reality is very different. Actually, Hindu men are more polygamous, marginally more polygamous than Muslim men. And therefore, the only moot point about marriage is polygamy. Let me ask you a question. Is polygamy a Christian issue? Are we to say that Christians also must have the legal right to practice polygamy? Is that our point? Then what is the problem? Where is the problem? So every other issue is like this. I've just illustrated with reference to one particular aspect of the prospective Uniform Civil Code legislation, that this hype or this kind of apprehension being activated is quite ill-founded. Now, let me introduce another important aspect, and that is from the spiritual point of view. After all, that's the point of view that concerns me most. I'm not a politician, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a person who tries to adopt a spiritual perspective on contemporary issues. Now, from a spiritual point of view, law becomes important, in fact intimidating, only in a situation of imperfection. For example, take the question of divorce. The reason why the Christian community, by the Christian community I mean the priests among us, priests and bishops among us, could become highly exercised over the Uniform Civil Code, is that there is a possibility of divorce being made easier. Now they will come up with all kinds of reasons why divorce should be made as difficult as possible, and ideally there should be no divorce. And law must ensure that people do not think of divorce, etc. Now, this is sheer cruelty in the disguise of religious piety or religious zeal. If you go by Jesus' wisdom, Jesus says man is not made for religion, religion is made for man, in which case it is utterly inexcusable that a young woman who happens to marry a lout of a fellow who doesn't care two hoots for the sanctity of married life or the sense of responsibility about relating to a life partner should suffer the hell, the misery of it lifelong, just because the wedding was solemnized in a church. And presumably the man and the woman were made to take pledges, presumably again, in the presence of God. Priests assume that wherever they are present, God is present. And whatever they make people to repeat is done under the authority of God. So it's out of priestly vanity that this mountainous human misery, especially the misery of married women, ill-married women, is sought to be perpetuated by criminalizing and stigmatizing divorce. Now let me give you an illustration. About 2 or 2.5 years ago, a mother and a daughter belonging to the Marthoma Church came to see me. I don't want to go into the details of the episode. An adorable young lady, an enlightened home. She happened to marry a boy from Bangalore who believed in the modern way of life where relationships should not constitute any limitation to one's chaotic way of life. So on the very first night he told the girl, look, it's fine that I have married you, but don't expect me to remain confined to you. I believe in my freedom, so I have many friends and I will continue those friendships. And I see no reason why I should be faithful to just one woman. So, you have to take it. A highly accomplished young lady took it for some time, then she found it absolutely impossible to go on. She confided in her mother, and the mother was heartbroken. Of course, she knew that had she consulted her priest, what the priest's response would be, so she brought her daughter to me. And having listened to the story, I said, don't waste even a single moment. File for divorce and enable your daughter to make a new beginning in life. The life of a human being is not to be wasted because she happened to be ill-married to a man who is less of a man, who doesn't even have the instincts of beasts. And fortunately, they heeded my advice, and today I'm glad to say that the girl is well married and she is leading a happy married life. So divorce is not understood, not viewed in the light of human realities by the priestly class, because for them, maintaining a tradition is far more important than allowing people to lead normal lives. I consider this to be an absolute aberration. If you have a daughter who is in this miserable, hellish plight, you will understand what I am saying. So, the point, now let me come to the point that I want to make. Keep this illustration at the back of your minds. All the legislation about divorce will become completely irrelevant, no matter how draconian these legal provisions are, will become completely irrelevant to a man and a woman who is leading a healthy family life. So law comes into the picture when aberrations begin to raise their heads. So the issue is not that there are laws. Please understand the point I'm making. The issue is not that there is a law, there are 10 laws or 100 laws. The issue is that there is decay, spiritual, moral, human decay in our midst. Laws about divorce, or laws making divorce easier, enabling people who are ill-united to separate without prolonged misery, such laws need not become a headache for anybody. In fact, they would become a blessing. Okay, they need not become a headache for anybody if the Christian community develops a culture of leading healthy family lives, married lives. But that's hardly the case. Look at the exponential increase of divorce, wrecked married lives in the Christian community. Nobody is bothered about it. But if there is a legislation that aims at making divorce a little easier, the entire priestly class will turn the world upside down. I find this absurd. I find this diabolical. I find this cruel, callous, indefensible, reprehensible. I hope they do not showcase this kind of barbarity. So let me state the principle as clearly and as emphatically as I can. Laws need to intimidate only those who have fallen short of the benchmark. And what is the benchmark that Jesus has prescribed for us? Jesus says, be perfect even as your Father in heaven is perfect. So let me say this to you very clearly. To those who are pursuing perfection, legal obligations, legal hindrances do not matter one bit. For example, there is a law that no one should kill. Okay? It's not a problem for me because I don't want to kill. In the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill. In the 10 Commandments, there is an order, a commandment, you shall not steal. It's not a problem for me because I don't want to steal. It's below my dignity even to think of it. So law becomes a problem only for those who are below the standard. Okay? So rather than address that reality, to take sword against the law itself is the most irresponsible, most the crudest thing you can imagine. I hope the Christian community does not showcase this crudity in the public space. Now, let me give an illustration from the Bible itself, from the Gospel itself, to illustrate this point or make this point even clearer. Jesus was killed through a priestly and political conspiracy. Okay? Caiaphas, Herod, Pontius Pilate. Religion, politics. Church, empire. Right? He was killed. Was he killed according to the law of the land? No. Pontius Pilate tried him, said, I find no guilt in him. But the crowd bayed for his blood, and therefore he didn't want to get into trouble. He said, okay, go, take him and crucify him. That was the authority of the law, unlawful law. But what is the meaning of the resurrection of Jesus Christ? The meaning is very simple. That's the meaning I've been trying to underline so far. What authority can the Roman Empire have on the soul of a person like Jesus Christ, the soul of a perfect man? Zilch. Absolutely nothing. That's why I'm saying, if we are a people of the resurrection, and there would have been no Christianity but for the resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ, at the core of Christianity is this tremendous conviction that the law has no binding force on those who are godly. Either you are under the tyranny of law or you are children of God. If you're children of God, you don't have to feel particularly intimidated by legislation. Only the wicked, only the evil people fear legislation. And I would say this to you, even if there are legislations that are discriminative against Christians, even those laws will not prevent you from excelling as human beings. In fact, if you know history, I can tell you that only people who struggled against huge odds excelled in life. Those who enjoyed all privileges got corrupted, they got emptied out, they became totally useless. It is when we struggle against impediments, odds, difficulties, that something profound, something powerful, something potent wakes up within us. And the glory and greatness of being people created in the image and likeness of God becomes visible to the world at large. That is the witness of the Christian community. But we are so far, far, far away from that norm. And therefore, we think that it's a great thing to showcase our irrational fears in the public domain as though that is going to make us a model for others. We'll become an object of ridicule. I sincerely hope and pray that it doesn't happen. That's the reason why I'm doing this video. I'm not saying that Christians should put up with every form of discrimination. I'm not saying that we have to live like slaves in this country. I'm not saying that we have to accept anything because of the fear of consequences. That's not my point. What I'm saying is our responses must be informed and our responses must be illumined by spiritual understanding. It's when we are put up against difficulties that our quality as a people of faith becomes clear. So for me, this is not a time to panic or to protest. This is a time to witness. And soon enough we shall know whether the Christian community has any witness at all. So I offer these thoughts to you for your continued reflection. Obviously, I've not argued the other side of the story. There is another side to the story, I'm aware of it. But as I said, due to the limitations of a video, I'm not going to argue that because there are many people who will come to you with the other side, and I don't have to therefore repeat what's going to be said by everyone. So please think about these concerns or these insights that I've shared with you, and may our community use this opportunity as a time of witness. Thank you.